All right, so we left off last week with the Origin of the Gods lecture. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through somewhat quickly information that you need. So, make sure that you take notes, and this will enable you to be able to pause and kind of go back and hopefully catch everything that I am telling you about the origin of the gods. So, when we last left off, Gaia and Uranus were locked in perpetual intercourse. Gaia has been impregnated with 12 children within her womb. They are the Titans. They cannot be born because their father is blocking their way. So she gives her children the stone scythe. Cronus is the one who steps up to the plate and says, I will go ahead and help release you from our father's grip. And so he ends up castrating his father, sending his father up to the sky where he belongs, and Mother Earth, Gaia, being by herself. And what happens is, as he castrates his father, Cronus sends his father's genitals flying over the earth. And what happens is blood drops down onto the earth, and two beings are created. The first are the giants, and they are said to be armored, like born with armor on them, and they were very loathed. Later, they try to unseat the Olympians, which we'll find out about later. The Furies are also the other group that comes from the blood of Uranus's genitals. And they are women who apparently would punish you for doing any sins, especially killing your kin, family members. So, what they would do was they were relentless, and they would pursue you all over the place and basically drive you so mad that you would end up committing suicide because of their relentlessness. So those are the two beings that are created from the blood of Uranus. Now, there were other secretions that came from Uranus's genitals. And what happened was that there was this woman who was born, and it is said that she was born of the secretions from her father's genitals and the mixture of the ocean. So what happened was she her name is Aphrodite. Her name was Aphrodite. So let me see if I can get the pen to work here so I can actually write on here. Oh, it's not going to let me. So you're just going to have to be okay with just trying to write as best as you can. Aphrodite. Aphrodite. So Aphrodite, or you might know her by her Roman name, which is Venus, is the goddess of sexual love and beauty. And she was born from the sea foam. And so she pops up, and this is yet another being that is created from the genitals of Uranus. All right. So next we have once Uranus and Gaia are separated, the Titans rule over the world and the heavens. And so Cronus obviously becomes the leader of the Titans because he has been the one who helped his mother. So he ends up the supreme ruler of the Titans, and he marries his sister, Rhea. They didn't have many options. So together they had 6 children. But what happened was that Cronus received a prophecy that one of his children would one day unseat him from being the supreme ruler of the gods. So, what he did in an effort to not let this happen is he would swallow each of his children every time that Rhea would give birth to one of them. Don't ask why, I don't know. But this is the way that the story goes. So, what happens, is that she gets a clue at some point, and when she gives birth to her 6th child, what she does is she deceives Cronus, and she wraps her child up in a baby blanket, which is really a stone, and she gives that to Cronus, and he swallows it, thinking that he's gotten rid of his 6th child. What happened was she was able to go and hide her child, Zeus, Zeus, on the island of Crete. and she sends him there. And then once he is fully grown, she brings him back and he helps his mother. And what they do is they force his father to regurgitate his 5 remaining brothers and sisters. And it said that they give him some kind of concoction to drink. And then he ends up spitting up all of the children that he had earlier swallowed. And so what happens is they end up in this epic battle between the Titans and the Olympians, and they end up defeating them in this epic battle. So what happens is Cronus and Rhea have given birth to these Olympians, and so you'll want to jot this family tree down. As you can see, we have Cronus and we have Rhea. Together they had Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hestia, Hades, and Demeter. So these are their 6 original children. Remember that Uranus was born or gave birth to Aphrodite. Zeus and Hera later on have 2 children, and the first being Ares. And it is said that Hephaestus was later birthed because Hera was very upset that Zeus had many affairs and had other children. So she has Hephaestus on her own. There's a story that soon as she birthed him, Zeus was very upset and threw him from Mount Olympus, causing him to be lame in the leg. And so you'll see him often depicted with a wheelchair. So Zeus actually ends up going on and having multiple affairs with various women. And from those affairs, he has Athena, he has Apollo and Artemis, the twins. He also has Dionysus and Hermes. So all of these people, the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 people, all make up the Olympians. There's also Eros, who is Aphrodite's son, which we'll talk about later. So those make up the Olympians. Now, back to the Battle of the Titans. Once Zeus helped his brothers and sisters escape from their father's belly, they fought the Titans. That was the generation of their parents. And what is said is that Prometheus, who is an uncle, he actually helped, as well as this 100-handed monster. They sided with the Olympians in this fight. And so because of their help and their aid, they were able to defeat the Titans. It is said that the Titans were then locked in the belly of the underworld in Tartarus, which is the worst part, and we'll talk about that in just a sec, forever. So that's where they lived. The Olympians moved to Mount Olympus, and that's where they're said to have reigned, and they would eat ambrosia and drink nectar. So they had a nice little life there. All right, so what happens is once the Olympians become the ruling group of gods on top Mount Olympus, the 3 brothers, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, decide that they need to divide up Earth. And so what happens is Hades takes the underworld, Poseidon took the oceans, and Zeus became the god of the gods and heavens. So he's like the father of the sky, the heavens, all of that good stuff, as well as being the god of the gods. Now, just to give you some information about the underworld is very interesting. Basically, you have this guy right here, and I'm going to see if I can get this pen to come up again. So we have this guy who is named Chiron, and he is the ferryman of the underworld. And what is said is that he carries the souls of the newly deceased across the rivers Styx, which is really important, and Akron. But you don't really need to know the river Akron. Just know that there was another one. But Styx is really the one that you need to be aware of. The river Styx is said to divide the world of the living from the world of the dead. So what the Greeks believed is that a coin to pay Chiron for passage was sometimes placed on or in the mouth of a dead person or on the eyes. If you've ever watched the movie Nacho Libre, he comes in and he puts some coins on a man who he believes is dead, and they're trying to, have this man have his last rites read so he has a safe passage to heaven. It's the same idea. It's just the Greeks thought that you would have to cross from the land of the living to the land of the dead, and the river Styx was the river that divided that. And so you would need to have safe passage from Chiron in order to get there. And so you'd pay the toll that way by having your loved ones put those coins on your eyes as you passed away. So it was believed that those who didn't have money for the fee would be left to wander the shore of the river for 100 years. And then finally they would get passage into the underworld. Now, if you go to the underworld, you would have, you might encounter this little being. And that is, and this will maybe let me go to the next slide. You would encounter Cerberus. And Cerberus is the guardian of the underworld, or of the gate of the underworld. He was a 3-headed dog, it says. So he's got 1, 2, 3 heads right here. And he would protect the underworld, kind of like Fluffy in Harry Potter. So now, if you went to the underworld, apparently it was said that everybody who got to the underworld would basically end up at Erebus. And Erebus is this arrival room, this waiting room. So when you first arrived, you just kind of hang out here. And it was a place of darkness, but that's really kind of it. So you'd wait until it was determined what was going to happen with your soul. Now, if you were just an ordinary person, you didn't do anything bad, you didn't do anything like amazing, you weren't like some amazingly well-known person, you would go here. And this is the Fields of Asphodel. And the Fields of Asphodel was just a place for ordinary or indifferent souls who didn't commit any significant crimes, didn't achieve any greatness. And so, you would just kind of hang here. And it was pretty plain and, but it wasn't like a terrible, scary, evil place. It would basically be where mortals who did not belong anywhere else in the underworld were sent. Now, if you were really bad, you'd go here. And this is not the place you would want to go. And that would be Tartarus. Tartarus was basically, it was like the deepest prison of the underworld. It's where the worst place in the underworld, and it was reserved for those experiencing punishment for their sins. So you wouldn't want to go to the Fields of Punishment, like this hellish place, or Tartarus. Before entering Tartarus, one would go to the Fields of Punishment, it was said, and it was a place for those who had created havoc on the world and committed crimes specifically against the gods. So if you, said that you were better than the gods, or you were very, just very cocky, you could end up here. They would rightfully, kill you, apparently, because you couldn't speak out against the gods. Hades himself, it was said, would make the individual's punishment of eternal suffering based on their specific crime. And so we will, at the end of our unit, we'll look at a couple of famous stories of people who went to the underworld and were made to suffer for the rest of their lives. But this is just kind of like this place where you wouldn't want to go. And so in the deepest, darkest pocket of Tartarus is where the Titans were held, it was said, after the Olympians defeated them. All right, now, the opposite of very bad is very good. And so if you would want to be a very good person and you achieved greatness during your lifetime and you were distinguished as a hero, this is where you would go. You'd go to the Elysian Fields or Elysium, and this was kind of like a heaven. So it was said to be the most beautiful and best place in the underworld, again, reserved for those who achieved greatness during their lifetime. And so, if you didn't want to just kind of be an ordinary person, you would try to strive for that. And so everything you did would be like trying to go on adventures and trying to work in the name of the gods and, always make sure that you were kind of like a God fearing person and always trying to do right by what the gods felt that humans should be doing in order to worship them. All right. So once this was all kind of settled, and we had this, heaven, hell, but basically, again, everything was in the underworld. So don't forget that. It wasn't like heaven was, we often think like, oh, it's up and then hell is down. It was all in the underworld. It was just different pockets of the underworld. Now, um, two people, Prometheus and Epimetheus, these were titans who sided with the Olympians. So they fought against their own brothers and sisters and helped their nieces and nephews out. Now, Prometheus, they sided again. Prometheus and Epimetheus were brothers who sided with Zeus and the Olympians. Prometheus's name stands for forethought, and Epimetheus's name stands for afterthought. So Prometheus was a lot smarter than Epimetheus because, again, if you are thinking ahead and planning something out, you're said to be obviously smarter than to go and act and then go like, oh, let me think about what I just did. Now, Epimetheus was tasked with creating animals, and that was his job, was to create the animals. And he gave the best gifts to the animals because, again, he was known for his afterthought. So he gave all these wonderful things. So he gave claws to the animals and terrifying teeth so they could rip apart whatever they needed to. He gave them leathery skin or fur to protect them. So he gave them great sense of smell, sense just like very significant senses that he gave to these animals. He gave them strength, he gave them quickness, he gave them courage. And then once he was done with that, his brother was allowed to go ahead and start in on the creation of man or humans. And so Prometheus was really upset because he felt like that his brother, in his afterthought, had given all of the greatest gifts to the animals. And so he wanted to give something significant to man. So he decided that when he crafted humans, that he would make them noble like the gods and stand up like the gods instead of like the animals who were all on fours or just twos and just only had two legs but didn't have arms. And so he decided that he was going to make them in the vision of the gods, which he did. He also provided them with the best parts left over from sacrifices, because basically what had happened was that Zeus was promised. Zeus had told Epimetheus and Prometheus, okay, so when humans make sacrifices to the gods, they have to decide, what part of an animal after they've sacrificed the animal they're going to burn in worship to the gods. And so what had happened was Prometheus, forethought, had decided that to basically take the best parts and save them for the humans, which was like the meat, some of the fur that they could use for to cover themselves and protect themselves. And so what he did was he gave two piles to Zeus to determine which one would be sent or which one would be sacrificed to the gods. And so what he decided to do was he made two bundles and basically he put the bones and the fat of the animals in one pile and made it kind of glisten because of the fat. And then he put in another pile the meat hidden by the fur of these animals. And he told Zeus to pick which one he would task humans with burning at an altar whenever they were going to worship to the gods. And of course, appealing to Zeus, because Zeus liked things that were shiny and looked nice, he chose the pile of the fat and the bones, which was kind of the leftover parts. And so basically he kind of tricked Zeus into picking the pile that he wanted him to, so that the humans would be able to have the meat and the fur or the skins of the animals to protect themselves. So the other thing that he did was he stole fire from the gods to give to man for protection, because it would provide them with a light source, it would provide them with heat, it would provide them with protection against animals who were scared of the fire. And so he thought that the humans deserve better than the animals. And so he gave them this ability to also think and reason. So this angered Zeus because he felt very tricked. So what he decided to do was because he had found out that he had been duped by Prometheus, and that fire had been stolen from the gods and given to man, which would make them almost equivalent to the gods. Zeus decided he was going to seek revenge upon man and Prometheus. So man was sent a punishment in the form of a woman, which I actually think is a gift. But all right, we'll go along with this story. So man was sent this punishment, woman, and Epimetheus took her as a present from the gods. Although Prometheus had warned him to never take a gift from the gods, because he always felt like the gods were trying to trick him. Again, Prometheus and Epimetheus are also gods. They just became lesser gods than the Olympians. So, but Prometheus was aware that he was, going to be perhaps duped, or that the gods had other plans. So he warned him not to take this gift, but Epimetheus, not listening to his brother, took this woman. Her name was Pandora. And so he gave her Pandora, or the gods gave Epimetheus Pandora, and she was the first woman. And her name means all gifts. And so she came with a box from the gods. And what happened was all the gods had given her all of the ills of the world that they put inside this box and gave to her to bring to Epimetheus. And they also gave her the trait of curiosity. Now, the ills of the world that were placed inside this box were plagues, illnesses, greed, sorrow, hatred, famine, evil. But they also put in one promising thing, and that was hope. So she wasn't supposed to open the box, but because they gave her the trait of curiosity, she did. And what had happened was that she released all of the ills into the world, but she also was able to include hope. And so this is what makes this very, they say that it's the one thing that can combat any illness in the world, or any ill of the world. Another version is that as she opened the box and released these ills and terrible things into the world, that she closed the lid, keeping hope inside the box. And that is representative of us. That even though all of these ills are out there, all these plagues are out there in the world, the one thing that we actually can control, and that is contained within each of us, is hope. So I kind of like that version of the story. But nonetheless, like, she released these things, and hope was also out there. So basically, another version of the myth is that her trait brings evil to mankind. It wasn't so much that it was her curiosity; she was just kind of like an evil nature. But however you cut it, apparently women are to blame for all the ills of the world, is what the Greeks believed, which is probably why no woman was ever educated in like ancient Greek society. So Prometheus also had to suffer So remember that the punishment was sent to Epimetheus in the form of Pandora, this woman, his first wife. But Prometheus suffered a far greater punishment than his brother. What happened was, for making man look like the gods and stealing fire from the gods and giving it to man, Zeus decided to chain Prometheus to the side of a mountain, Mount Parnassus. And what had happened was, it is said that every day an eagle would come and eat Prometheus's liver, and it would regenerate overnight, only for him to endure this punishment over and over and over again on a daily basis. Now, what's really interesting is the liver is the only organ that regenerates itself. And so if you take off a piece, it can regenerate as long as it's a healthy liver. But this is the punishment that he was made to suffer until much later, when a guy, you probably know him by the name of Hercules, actually came by and saw that he was chained to the side of the mountain, and decided to break the chains that Prometheus could never break and rescue him and let him go. So that's the story of how the world came to be. And it is said that, Epimetheus and Pandora had the first children, and then because they were sent to Earth, because they had done these bad things against the Olympians, they weren't even locked in Tartarus. They just were made to suffer on Earth, and they gave birth to the first humans, and then it just kind of was a cyclical nature from there. All right, so that's just some information about how the world came to be according to the Greeks.